Hey everyone, we are working to hit 1,000 subscribers and I need your help to get there. If you enjoy the content, please hit that subscribe button right now.
Whoa. Whoa. Did he just say that? Did Mark Schlereth, three-time Super Bowl champion, Denver Broncos legend, co-host of Breakfast Ball on FS1, did he just go on national television and call Shedeur Sanders supporters stupid? Did he just say the word sycophants on a sports show in May about a 24-year-old second-year quarterback who hasn't even thrown a pass in a regular season game yet this year? And did he do all of that while citing anonymous coaches? Coaches he says he talked to. Coaches from a staff that no longer even exists in Cleveland, by the way, as his evidence that Watson deserves to be ahead of Shedeur in the competition? Oh, we are going in today. Welcome in. I'm Dre Fiver from Dre Reports. No filter. No fluff. Let's get into it. Because here is what just happened. Mark Schlereth went on Breakfast Ball and lit a match next to a powder keg that was already smoking. And now, Coach Prime, Deion Sanders himself, Hall of Famer, the most famous father in professional football, head coach of the Colorado Buffaloes, and a man who has never once in his life walked away from a battle he believed he could win, has been pulled into the orbit of this thing. And when Deion Sanders gets pulled into something, everybody watches. So let me break down every single layer of what is happening here, because there are multiple storylines running simultaneously, and I want to make sure you understand all of them. Let's start from the top. Mark Schlereth, appearing on Breakfast Ball on FS1, alongside Danny Parkins and Craig Carton, weighed in on the Browns quarterback competition following Mary Kay Cabot's report that Deshaun Watson emerged from voluntary minicamp with what she described as an edge over Shedeur Sanders. Now, Schlereth didn't just agree with Cabot's assessment and move on. He escalated. He reached out to his contacts, he talked to coaches, and then he came back on television and said, and I'm citing this directly as reported by Pro Football Network, that the coaches on the Browns staff told him, and I quote, there was a lot of work to be done with Sanders, and that on film, when you study him, there was a lot of work left to do. He said it didn't surprise him that Watson was ahead in the competition. And then, and this is where it went from a football take to a cultural flashpoint, Schlereth went after the fan base. He said Shedeur's supporters, his defenders, the people pushing back on the narrative, were sycophants. He said they were so stupid and called the whole thing ridiculous. Now, hold on. Let me just say what needs to be said about that choice of words, because this is Dre's personal opinion, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. You can disagree with Shedeur Sanders. You can think Watson deserves more reps. You can cite film. You can cite stats. You can make a legitimate football argument for any of the quarterbacks on that roster. But calling the people who support a 24-year-old kid stupid and sycophants on a national platform, that's not analysis. That's contempt. And when you pile that contempt on top of everything this kid has already been through, the draft slide, the crank phone call, the constant questioning of his character, the narrative machine that has followed him since Colorado, you are not talking football anymore. You are talking about something much bigger, and Deion Sanders knows exactly what that something is. Now let's talk about what Schlereth actually said about his sources, because this matters. His argument is built on conversations with coaches. Coaches he says he's spoken to about Shedeur Sanders' game, about what needed development, about why Watson being ahead makes sense. And look, Schlereth is a legitimate voice. 3 Super Bowl rings. He played in the trenches. He knows football. He's not some random social media personality. His sources presumably are real. But here is the question Dre is going to ask that nobody else seems to want to ask. Which coaches? From which staff? Because the Cleveland Browns just brought in Todd Monken as their brand new head coach, a man who has publicly stated he is not there yet on naming a starter, a man who told reporters he needs to be on the field with these players before he can make evaluations. Is Schlereth talking to the old staff that no longer runs the building? Is he talking to coaches who evaluated Shedeur last year under an entirely different system, with an entirely different supporting cast, and under entirely different circumstances? Because if that's the case, then citing their opinions as evidence for who should start in 2026 is not much better than citing your text messages from 2 head coaches ago. As reported by Fox News, Todd Monken himself confirmed that at the one practice open to media during minicamp, Shedeur Sanders was actually slated to get more reps overall, even though Watson appeared to lead certain rotations in front of the cameras. Let me say that again. The head coach said Sanders was scheduled for more reps, but the one moment the cameras were rolling, Watson was out front. And that became the headline. That became the evidence of a lead. That became the basis for Schlereth going on television and calling people stupid for questioning the narrative. I'm sorry, but you've got to acknowledge that the information environment here is a little messy, and that reasonable people pushing back on the Cabot report are not sycophants. They are people who looked at the evidence and said, wait, this doesn't fully add up. Now let's get to Coach Prime, because Deion Sanders' response to all of this drama is actually more interesting than you might expect, and it tells you a lot about where this family is right now. According to Sports Illustrated's reporting on the situation, when Shedeur Sanders, that's Shedeur's older brother, the former Colorado safety, went on social media and told Mary Kay Cabot to go make a sandwich in response to her Watson First reporting. Deion was asked about it publicly, and Coach Prime's answer, "You majoring on a minor. Y'all over here tripping about what somebody said on the internet. I ain't got time for that. I got too many things I'm praying for." That's Deion Sanders choosing his battles. That's a man who has been in this public arena longer than most of these reporters have been alive, deciding that this particular fight is not worth his energy right now. And honestly, that is the smart move. That is the seasoned, calculated, emotionally intelligent response. But, and here's where Dre reads between the lines, because that is literally what we do on this channel. The fact that Deion responded at all tells you something. A man who truly has no concern about a narrative does not acknowledge it publicly. He addressed it. He minimized it. Yes, he dismissed it with that smooth primetime energy. But he addressed it. And earlier this year, when a reporter questioned Shedeur's identity and standing as he entered his second season, Deion went to Instagram immediately and wrote, "As reported by Heavy, Lord Jesus, we just got back started, and how you gon' tell us who we are? That's a Sanders you're talking to, baby." That is not a man who is indifferent. That is a man who is watching every single thing being said about his son, processing it through the lens of everything that family has been through, and choosing his response very, very carefully. What Schlereth did by going on television and using the word sycophants to describe Shedeur's supporters is put fresh oxygen on a fire that the Sanders family has been carefully managing for over a year. It is not a coincidence that the narrative arc of Shedeur Sanders, from alleged draft sabotage, to the crank phone call during the draft that was traced back to the son of an NFL defensive coordinator, to the anonymous arrogance reports from the Combine, to now anonymous coaches being cited to dismiss his development, follows a remarkably consistent pattern. Whether that pattern is coordinated or just reflects genuine organizational skepticism about the kid, the result is the same. Shedeur Sanders has had to fight harder, overcome more, and prove himself against a higher bar than virtually any other quarterback in the league. And Deion Sanders has watched all of it from the sideline with that calm, calculating Hall of Fame brain working at full speed. Let me spend a minute on the substance of Schlereth's football argument, because I refuse to be the guy who just dismisses everything he says because of how he said it. Because underneath the inflammatory language, there is a real football debate happening here. And Schlereth's core point, that Shedeur Sanders has things to work on, that his first year in the league showed genuine areas of concern, that Watson's experience in similar offensive systems gives him a real advantage in the early stages of an install. These are not insane arguments. Let's be real about what we saw from Shedeur last year. According to Pro Football Sports Network's QB impact metric, Sanders' impact score ranked among the lower tier in the league. He held the ball too long. He tried to make plays that weren't there. He took sacks that didn't need to happen. These are documented, film-based criticisms that even his supporters mostly acknowledge. The kid has things to clean up. That's just true. But here's the counter, and this is where I start to lose patience with the Schlereth framing. Shedeur Sanders played for 7 starts as a rookie for a team that had been incoherent at the quarterback position for the better part of a decade, with a receiving core that was patchwork at best, behind an offensive line that had been one of the worst in the league, under a coaching staff that has since been replaced. And in that environment, he went 3-4. He averaged 364 yards in his best performance, threw 4 touchdowns in a single game. He earned a Pro Bowl alternate nod. And as has been widely reported, the offense simply felt different when he was on the field. His teammates believed. You can see it in how Malik Collins talked about him. You can see it in the energy that surrounded that locker room in December when Shedeur was under center. That is not nothing. That is the foundation of something real. Schlereth's anonymous coaches were evaluating a rookie in his first 7 starts. Todd Monken is evaluating a second-year quarterback with a new offensive line, new receivers, and a coach who has publicly said he is genuinely excited to work with this kid. Those are 2 completely different evaluations of 2 completely different situations. And collapsing them into the same conversation, using last year's coaching staff's private concerns to support a current argument about who should start in 2026, is intellectually sloppy, even if it's not intentionally dishonest. Now let's zoom out because there's a bigger picture here that I think gets lost when we get into the weeds of anonymous coaches and minicamp rep counts. The Cleveland Browns are at a genuine crossroads that is about much more than who starts at quarterback in Week 1. This is about what kind of franchise they want to be. It is about whether the mistakes of the Watson era, the $230 million fully guaranteed contract, the years of dysfunction, the organizational chaos, are finally behind them, or whether those mistakes are going to cast their shadow forward one more time. Because if Watson gets handed this job in June based on reputation and financial investment rather than genuine head-to-head performance, then what was the point of bringing in Todd Monken? What was the point of hiring a new offensive mind, promising an open competition, building a new roster around youth and athleticism? What was the point of any of it? As reported by Yahoo Sports and the Orange and Brown Talk podcast, Mary Kay Cabot herself said it best when she noted that all of Cleveland's offseason improvements, the new line, the new receivers, the new scheme, mean nothing if the quarterback is not performing at a high level. The infrastructure question and the quarterback question are inseparable. And right now, heading into OTAs in mid-May, the honest answer is that nobody knows which quarterback will give this team its best chance. Not Schlereth, not Cabot, not the anonymous coaches, not me. What we do know is that the competition needs to be real and it needs to be fair. And that's exactly what Malik Collins was saying when he sat across from Teron Armstead on the set and told the world, "Let the best man win." Here's something else I want to address, because I've seen it in the comments and I hear it from people in my circle. The argument that Shedeur is somehow undermined by the passion of his supporters. That the conspiracy theories some of his fans have pushed, about the draft being rigged, about the NFL being out to get him, somehow reflect poorly on the quarterback himself. And I understand that argument to a point. I understand that when your fan base amplifies every grievance and treats every unfavorable report as sabotage, it creates noise that can drown out legitimate criticism. But here is where I draw the line. Shedeur Sanders did not make the crank phone call that happened during his draft night. He did not engineer the 5-round slide. He showed up, threw the ball, won games, earned teammates' respect, and came back for year 2 with a renewed mindset. As reported by Anscape in their deep dive on the 2026 draft landscape, Shedeur himself said from OTAs last year, "I don't look at anything as a negative. I view everything. I'm just happy. I'm thankful. I'm blessed. I feel bulletproof." That is not the language of a victim. That is the language of a competitor who has been tested and come out the other side intact. So what happens next? Let me give you the Dre Fiver breakdown of how this all plays out. The Browns begin organized team activities in mid-May. The pads don't come on yet, but the routes are run, the timing is established, and the coaching staff begins forming genuine impressions. Then comes the June minicamp, June 9 through 11, which is where, according to Mary Kay Cabot's original reporting, Todd Monken reportedly wants to have identified a starter. Now, that June deadline has already been partially walked back by Monken himself, who made clear that he is not going to rush this decision. But the pressure is real. OTAs build into training camp in late July, and that is where the final evaluation happens. Pads on, Myles Garrett coming off the edge, defenses keyed up, quarterbacks making split-second decisions under real pressure for the first time since last season. If Shedeur Sanders goes through OTAs and minicamp and shows that he has internalized Todd Monken's system, that he can manage the pre-snap reads, make the underneath throw when it's there, and demonstrate the processing speed that even Schlereth acknowledged he has. And Schlereth did acknowledge it, back during the combine cycle when he called Shedeur incredibly accurate and praised his football intelligence. Then the conversation shifts. Then the narrative shifts. Then, the anonymous coaches and the breakfast ball takes become footnotes in the story of how Shedeur Sanders won a starting job that a lot of people didn't think he was ready for. And if Watson outplays him, if Deshaun Watson comes out in OTAs and looks like the 2018, 2019, 2020 version of himself, the guy who led the Texans to playoffs, the guy who was a Pro Bowl selection 3 years running, then you start Watson. You start him, and Shedeur goes to work on getting better. And you trust that Todd Monken's coaching staff is honest enough to make the change mid-season, if the situation demands it. Because as multiple analysts have noted, given Cleveland's injury history at quarterback, Shedeur Sanders will play games this year regardless of who gets the Week 1 nod. But here is what I refuse to accept, and here is the line in the sand that Dre Reports is drawing right now. I refuse to accept that the decision should be made in April, based on voluntary minicamp reps and shorts, anonymous coaches from last year's staff, and national television commentators calling people sycophants for asking reasonable questions. That is not how you build a winning franchise. That is how you continue a cycle of organizational dysfunction that has cost the Cleveland Browns decades of relevance. Todd Monken knows it, Malik Collins knows it. And deep down, I think even Mark Schlereth knows it. He's just too committed to his take to walk it back now. Deion Sanders is watching all of this. He is watching every report, every television segment, every social media post. He is watching his son navigate a media environment that has been hostile to him since before he threw his first NFL pass. And Coach Prime is doing what he has always done, staying just composed enough to avoid the trap, staying just visible enough to keep the pressure on, and trusting that his son has the tools to answer every critic the only way it really matters. On the field, in the fall, when the games count. That is the story, that is where we are, and Dre Reports is going to be here for every single chapter of it. And that is your full breakdown right there, ladies and gentlemen. Mark Schlereth lit the match, the Shedeur fanbase went wild. Deion Sanders handled it like the Hall of Famer he is. Composed, measured, but make no mistake, he is not standing down. And Shedeur Sanders is somewhere right now, in a film room or on a practice field, doing exactly what his father told him to do on ESPN's First Take when asked what his son needs to do to win this job. Work. Just work. Because that's the way you win everything in life. If this video gave you something today, if it gave you context, if it gave you a perspective that the mainstream sports shows are too afraid to give you, then show me some love. Smash that like button right now. Demolish it. And drop a comment below. Is Mark Schlereth out of line calling Shedeur's fans sycophants? Or does he have a point about the film? I genuinely want to hear both sides. This is the kind of debate that makes the comment section worth reading. And if you are not subscribed to Dre Reports, I have been asking nicely, and now I am asking with purpose. Subscribe right now. Hit that bell. Share this video. Send it to every Browns fan you know. Send it to that person who thinks Schlereth's anonymous coaches settle the argument. Let's have the conversation for real. I'm Dre Fiver. This is Dre Reports. See you in the next one.